What's up, ladies and gents, Noli here. Welcome to my full review for the Alesso Heist DLC. It's been out a whole week, so I feel I'm fully qualified to talk about all aspects and review it properly so you guys know whether it's worth the £5 or $7 purchase, depending on where you live. So, first of all, I'm going to start off with what I see as the worst part of the DLC, and that is the heist loud. In many ways, it should be a good loud heist, and in those ways it is. It's reasonably fast paced, you've got to move around a lot. Enemy spawn points are generally quite strong, and I'm not going to say it isn't exciting. However, my main problem with this heist loud is, first of all, difficulty. The steep jump from Overkill to Death Wish is quite ridiculous. It's incredibly difficult to play this heist on Death Wish, simply because the way the cover, the spawn system works. It's meant to be fast and exciting, but as such it makes Death Wish very, very difficult if you try and do it loud, which I don't like to see. I mean, difficulty progression should be gradual, you should feel it, but you should be able to deal with it. And I feel this heist, if you're going full Death Wish loud, it's one of the hardest in the game. I don't necessarily feel like the reward warrants it, which seems like a shame to me. Reward-wise, the heist isn't bad for it. It's not great either, though. I'm not going to recommend it above other potential options, which since the change to the experience system have been incredible. But as I say, it certainly rewards well enough. But back onto why this heist as a loud heist is not necessarily the best, and it's certainly not my favourite of the DLCs. So, another issue I've found with it, and this may be unique to myself, essentially lockpicking doors, which is the second objective if you choose to do the heist loud, has never been a fun option, if you ask me, in a loud heist. You want loud heists to involve you setting things up in the background, having to defend them, having to move from place to place to defend them. So be that, but having to move from place to place to unlock doors is, active in the first sense, but when you're lockpicking that door, it's frustrating, to say the least. And having to do that up to 5, 6, 7 times, depending on how many doors you're going through, depending whether you're lockpicking the first door, it can be a little bit frustrating. And in many places, these areas, the combat's very tight, very difficult to deal with, and a little bit frustrating at times. So that was one of my major gripes. I felt that the second objective, it works nicely on stealth, it makes you move all the way around the map, but on loud, it's a bit of a nuisance. I feel that if you're going to do this heist loud at all, I would always recommend trying to stealth the start of the mission, because that is certainly an option. Moving on to the next objective, which I also don't think is particularly suited. It's a little more fun, it's more innovative, certainly, and that is the moving around of the forklift truck so you can place the C4. Now, I think this is awkward no matter how you look at it, but it's a load of fun, and in a group of 4, it can get a little ridiculous and get a little funny. I do like vehicles on the whole, and I think this is a nice, interesting way of using them. But on a loud heist, this is hectic. There's absolutely no cover while you're moving around, while you're trying to put the C4 up. And so this can just lead to more frustration than anything else. It's very fiddly, and overall it doesn't usually suit what I would call blunt mechanics placed into a loud heist. And as such, it falters a little bit here again. Now we have probably my favourite part of the loud heist. First of all, moving around on the heist is a load of fun, both in stealth and in loud. The way the paths are set up, reasonably interesting, good connections, and so you can sort of loop your way around the cops. You can play it sensibly on loud heists. But when you get up into the control panel area, it's quite a fun hold down, I'll be honest, but it's very, very hard, especially on the harder difficulties, if you ask me, and it can get a little bit too hectic, and it can get a little bit too confusing. What you're doing is you're operating the pyrotechnics for Alesso's heist, for Alesso's concert, and if you're doing it loud, there's going to be problems cropping up, things going on fire, which, it's a reasonable punishment for messing up stealth, I suppose, and I don't mind that at all. And the overall choke point here is fun, and this is how loud heist really should be. And it operates well, it's enjoyably satisfying, I feel. So it's a job well done on that point. I'll get back to that section though when I'm talking about the stealth portion of the heist. From then, though, you've got the same problem you had previously, getting downstairs, shoving those circular saws on, which are cool, I like them. But you've got the same issue of climbing while in pretty intense combat on harder difficulties, and it just feels more fiddly than it needs to be. Then a ridiculous amount of bag moving for a very long distance. What I do like is they added some quite new, enjoyable, innovative ways to move around, the chutes, the zip lines. They work nicely, but if you want to get the achievement, which involves not using those, it's going to be an absolute nightmare, and you have to do it on overkill difficulty or above. So prepare for struggle. You better bring a full team of 4. But yeah, the shoots are fun. Nice idea. Function quite well. Even work nicely on stealth, I found. You can hide body bags in there. That's cool. But the overall feel of the heist is slightly uncomfortable as a loud heist. I feel this will happen a lot when you set up a heist meant for stealth and loud. You've got to have the objectives resulting in the same thing. But in many ways, I feel a heist like Big Bank, which kind of separates the objectives, does much better than one like this. You know, you go loud, you have to drop the drill in, or you have to set up the thermite. You have to wait for the vault to be drilled. In a heist like this, either way, you're setting up C4, you're going to help with the pyrotechnics, and you're going to set up the circular. You know, that's how it is either way, and it generally doesn't suit missions. I wish objectives were a little bit separate for the two, and I think that's why the loud portion of this heist really falls down. I definitely feel this is one of the worst DLC loud heists, certainly behind Hotline Miami, I'd say, certainly behind Big Bank, and almost certainly behind the Diamond as well. So let's talk about the heist in Stealth, which I have a lot of nice things to say about. I think it's a lot of fun. By no means do I think it's the best stealth heist in the game, though. It still has a couple of flaws, but it is certainly a more fun stealth heist than it is loud. First bit, getting the C4, it's good. It's what they like to force you to do, and it feels like more of a stealth objective than anything, because it's making you explore the whole map. It's making you move around patrols, move around the patrolling civilians as well, which are a nice addition, as I mentioned, to stealth in my first impressions video. I'm not going to talk through all the objectives again. Stealth, they tend to work a bit better. Yeah, the car is still fiddly, but if you're successful enough to take out the guard operating the cameras, you know, that I feel is rewarded really nicely in that area, simply because the cameras are placed very well. Now, moving around the map, as I've already mentioned, very important part of this heist in Stealth, and it's challenging enough. On Death Wish, this isn't too difficult a heist, assuming you're playing with a full team of 4, though. It's much, much easier than it is doing it loud. The only difficulty is moving the bags again. But you don't actually have to move them as far on Stealth, which again is a nice reward for staying sneaky throughout the whole heist. Now, on to the pyrotechnic part. The part where you listen to Alesso's heist. The real allure, I suppose, of the heist, the different part, the part that heists haven't really had before. The music on this heist is generally good, I feel. It's fitting, it's very Payday style. I think anyone who says this is a far removed from Vikland's own work is probably wrong. I do think there is certainly a similar feel to it. But, you know, if you don't like Alesso, there's no way you're going to enjoy this heist. If you're a huge fan, 10 out of 10, you're going to love it. You're going to love the homage to the guy. You're going to love the music, and then that's going to be so important to enjoying the heist. But if you don't like him, I can't imagine this is a comfortable heist for you to sit through. Especially this part, because you have to watch it, you have to operate the pyrotechnics, press the right buttons, which, you know, simple little mini-game, fun enough, more hectic in a loud heist. But my problem with this is it got old fast, even for me who thinks the song is quite good, especially considering I'm not a huge fan of the genre. Doing this same thing, listening to the same track over and over again, watching the same background loop over and over was not entertaining after the 4th, 5th time of doing it. It's great and very rewarding the first second, though. So, as such, there's a wide array of mods on offer. I'm going to point you in those directions if you're not a huge fan of it, to spice things up and change it just that little bit, so you don't just feel like you're listening and watching Alesso every time. Because I do think this discourages replayability. This particular part of the heist in many ways. But overall, I think it's great. You know, I think they did the right thing with it. I think they worked it in well, but they should have seen this coming. There's no way people are just going to want to sit through this heist over and over again if they have to just sit through the same section. And they did try and change it up, but I don't think they were wholeheartedly successful. So it's one of the biggest downsides I feel to the heist, is that though it's fun the first couple of times, you're just going to pay no attention. It's going to become a mini-game later on, which is a shame, probably, depending on what you think of the music. Now, on to the pistol we got. Okay, so the pistol, the Matev 357 Magnum, has so many functional similarities to the Bronco that it's difficult to really delineate. Some people think this has removed the Bronco as an option in the conversation. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think they work very similarly, and it's going to be off your preference. Now, don't get me wrong. This weapon looks and feels great. It's a totally new take on the Magnum style, and it's very, very functional, especially on Overkill. I mean, it works on Death Wish as well, don't get me wrong, but similar to the Bronco, there are much, much better options. So in no way am I going to say this is a must-buy pistol. This is not a game changer. They've not thrown an amazing weapon into a $7 DLC, which to an extent is probably a relief to many of you. But it's certainly not bad. I do think in some ways it does probably replace the Bronco, but I absolutely hate the iron sights on it personally. I find it hard to use. Other than that, though, it feels and acts very, very well. I don't think there's much else to go into about this weapon. In a couple of ways, it's better than the Bronco. In a couple, it certainly isn't. If you like the look of it, you know, it's worth picking up. But buying this DLC for this pistol alone, absolutely not. I would never condone that. It's way too similar to an existing weapon. You're not going to get anything particularly new out of it. But if you enjoy it, you will certainly, you know, you enjoy the Magnum style of pistol, you'll certainly enjoy this one. And it's a nice new take. So I'm by no means disappointed with the weapon. I just don't think it's necessarily a standout part of the DLC. I'd certainly buy it for the heist over the pistol, but that is just me. Now, we're going to move on to mask, patterns, materials, and of course the achievements. Let's start off talking about the masks. Okay, so starting off with the two worst looking masks, if you ask me, the male and female concert goers. They're a new take on Mr. and Mrs. Mannequin, but I generally think the originals look nicer. So these to me are a bit of a miss. I'm not a huge fan of those masks. They do fall down. I don't think it's worth buying a DLC for masks in general, but these two certainly not. However, Boombox and Cantus, both really nice looking masks. A huge fan in particular of Cantus. Boombox also looks brilliant. Boombox is very difficult to pick up. These two masks actually look like, you know, infamous masks. Some of the top tier looking masks in the game. Really, really nice, and especially if you like the sort of steampunk style that's coming across with them. Steampunk, techno, electronic sort of feel. You will love these masks. More importantly, I feel though, absolute boom across the board with the materials. Probably the nicest set of materials ever added in a DLC. Stained glass, certainly an interesting look. Absolutely not my favourite, but it is still a nice looking and very different feeling material. Bionic, though, may indeed be the best material in the game. It looks so nice. It's hard to say these things about, you know, subjective, artistic sort of things like the materials and the patterns in Payday. But I think, you know, general consensus is these are nice looking materials. Enlightenment combines some wonderful colour scheme. And finally, Dim Blue is nothing particularly new, but also looks absolutely amazing on all the masks we've got in the DLC. And the masks and materials go very nicely together, which is also quite important if you want more of a thematic feel. Patterns, sadly, overall are not amazing. Certainly not the same level as the materials, if you ask me. Smoke looks nice, certainly. And the circle raster is also an okay looking pattern. Certainly could go on some masks quite nicely. I generally think previous DLCs have done a bad job with the patterns, but on the whole, the best patterns in the game are actually the ones that existed before DLCs. They've not had the world's best job in creating patterns, if you ask me. However, you know, you love you love Alesso, you'll probably want to rep his logo on the forehead of your mask as well. So, if you're a huge fan, there'll be something there to cater for you. Otherwise, I don't think the patterns are great. Materials are phenomenal, and one of the main reasons I'm really happy I've purchased this DLC. And overall, the masks, too good, too not so good, but the two that are good are very good. And that's how I feel about the aesthetics added in this DLC. One important thing to note when it comes to thinking about purchasing this. You can, of course, play the heist, potentially the most important part of the DLC. Probably the most important part of every heist DLC, obviously. The other things are more sort of sweets, cherries on the top. But the most fun I've had with it is solo stealthing, especially on the first day. Learning the heist, exploring. It's aesthetically wonderful, not something I've touched on yet. It looks really nice. It's up there, I feel, with the visuals of the park. Very different style of visuals, but it's really up there. The new looking NPCs look fantastic as well. Huge improvements generally graphically. I mean, I was slightly disappointed by the way the concert looked, the sort of almost GIF image silhouettes in the background, but I think it's balanced out by the cool light show in the background and the general aesthetics of the heist. Definitely something worth mentioning. But like I said, solo stealth is the most fun I've had with it. The only way you can solo stealth this heist is sadly if you pick it up. Otherwise, you're going to have to play with other people, which by no means is a bad thing, but it's the way I've enjoyed the heist the most. So if you are into solo stealthing, if you're into stealthing in general, this heist certainly gets more of a recommendation than otherwise. One final thing to talk about, the achievements. Now, I have unlocked all the achievements, and I was generally comfortable with them. They were fun. Slightly disappointed that there weren't an awful lot of them. And this doesn't come as a huge surprise, bearing in mind that all the attachments for the Mateva are already in the game, which has been a change they've made recently, and I support it to an extent. I think it's good in that it assists people in getting the full use out of their DLC, I think it was something that must have been talked about with the community, and I don't think it's necessarily all bad. But it does mean that there are fewer achievements, especially the fact that there were no achievements involving the DLC weapon did disappoint me to an extent. But 5 achievements, we built the city on electronic progressive house music, that's just for completing it on Death Wish. So you've only really got 4 primary achievements, 1 each for unlocking a mask. You got the Sound of Silence, Even Steven, Fuck It We're Walking, I've already talked about that a bit more, and MS Stev. So, Fuck It You're Walking, We're Walking I should say, is a pain. For one of the worst looking masks in the DLC, you're going to move all the bags without using any of the assistance, the chute, the zip line, on overkill or above. Certainly not an easy achievement to pick up. Fun in a group, but a bit of a pain. The MS Dev, something you're going to probably unlock naturally just for completing the pyrotechnics scene without making any mistakes, which isn't too difficult, especially if you're doing it on the easier difficulties where you only get 1 instruction at a time. Even Steven, yeah. I like this achievement. It's a nice little homage to a previous heist, of course. You got to get your $7 back. Of course, you lost those $7 in the Hotston breakout. You've got to walk up with the last remaining piece of C4 and blow up the what's it called, ticket holder, I suppose. And that way you get your $7 back, which I liked, nice little achievement, which is a bit different, and I always like these sort of more Easter eggy ones. The Sound of Silence, though, certainly a difficult achievement. Certainly unlocks one of the nicer masks we get, the boombox, of course. All you have to do is complete the heist without killing anyone. I say all. But it doesn't specify any difficulty, so doing it on normal, certainly a better option, especially with a full team of 4. It won't be too difficult, but there is certainly challenge. Having to do the whole heist without taking out the guard controlling the cameras can be quite difficult. Keep that in mind. You're going to need camera loop, which, as I mentioned in my first impressions, it's great that this heist throws a couple more perks into the mix. One final thing to mention about the stealth section of the heist, the escape is pretty cool. It doesn't necessarily work the way I think Overkill imagined it would, but the idea that you take your mask off, you get all your bags out in a simpler, faster way through the air vent, it's cool, and then you stroll out like nothing happened. I like that. It was a lovely touch to the heist, and it was original and improved the overall heist feel for me on completing it in stealth. Now, overall, I'm going to have to give this heist, I would say, I've really struggled to say 6 or 7. I mean, 6.5 seems fair. I'm going to go and give it a 7. It's certainly above average for a Payday heist. I wouldn't necessarily it's above average for all the DLC heists. We've definitely seen better ones in the past. But given the material they were working with, I think Overkill did a good job. The weapon is fun. It feels different. It isn't actually particularly different. And they've really excelled themselves overall, I would say, with mass and materials. And the patterns are quite nice as well. So, by no means the best DLC heist. I'm sure if you're a fan of Alesso, you will have picked it up already. But if you are, it's a must-buy. Hugely recommended. If you hate the guy, don't touch it. It definitely is not for you. If you're like me, you're just looking for a fun Payday heist, this certainly is fun the first couple of times. Don't forget, it's £5 or $7, which is quite a hefty sum. I recommend you try it out first, but in doing so, you may take the shine off the heist and make it a less worthy purchase. You know, for me, it all comes down to how do you think you're going to rate the weapon? Are you going to make use of the mass materials? If you are, definitely think about picking up this DLC. The heist is a nice little sweetener to the deal. You know, I do say the heist is the more important part, but for this one, I think the emphasis has to be what you get for purchasing it as opposed to just playing it with friends who've already picked it up. Decent heist, certainly not the best. I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope it will, one way or another, inform your decision. Let me know whether, if you picked it up, you are happy with your purchase, where you place this heist. You know, some people I'm sure love it. It's difficult to review something like this, to really put value on everything we get. I'm just giving my opinion. I've spent a decent amount of time with the heist as well. I'm not just taking these ideas off the top of my head. So let me know if you are happy with your purchase, and also what you're considering about doing after watching this review, whether you think it's going to be worth picking it up or not. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I will see you all in the next video.